Hey there bosses, and welcome back to my channel. Did you miss me? I missed you. And yes, my Christmas tree is still up. It is January 15th. I just love seeing it. It just adds something to the environment. I will take it down eventually, but for now I'm having fun with it. Anyway, today's video I'm going to be sharing some of the lessons I learned from starting a second business last year. And I think these lessons, they're a good way for me to reflect, but also a good way for me to share with you in real time things that I'm doing, and also to hopefully inspire you on your own entrepreneurial journey. So we'll talk about that today, but before we do, let's make a cup of tea. My cup here says faith, and as I was making the tea and I was pouring it, I was thinking about how faith has played a role in my business. And maybe that wasn't the first thing that you were hoping to hear me say, but I wanted to say that first because one of the prayers that I love to pray is, Lord, let the doors that are supposed to open for me, and the doors that are not supposed to open, not open. And as I've done that, I've come to realize that those things exactly have happened, that the doors that are not meant for me, when I try to pound on them, when I try to knock on them, it doesn't really work out as well as when the doors that are really meant for me do open. And that's why I want to start this video and start these lessons I've learned about business, because I started, for context, I started a blog back in 2014. Got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug and decided to start a blog. Started making money from there. And then in 2017 decided to start a freelance writing business because I'd been blogging for years and I'd built that writing skill. And so I leveraged that into a freelance writing business. And that essentially has led me to the career I have now as a medical writer. And that whole thing, that whole experience of going from blogger to freelance writer to being a medical writer really has been a show of the doors opening for me where they should open. And at this point, I can say that, yes, I'm a six-figure entrepreneur, and I've done this sometimes on a full-time basis, and then sometimes whilst working a full-time job. And so one of the first lessons that I want to share with you is that there's really no one right way to entrepreneur. You can take that to the bank. There isn't. Like, sometimes I'll, watch people making ads, and, nothing against the people that, are trying to make money selling their coaching programs, selling entrepreneurial programs. But there really is no one thing or one way to succeed as an entrepreneur. And you get to define what your definition of success is. For some people, they want to hit $1 million every year. They want to hit $10 million for whatever reason they want to hit it. And maybe for you, hitting $1 million is not the goal. Maybe freedom is the goal. Maybe the ability to travel around the world while making an income is the goal. And so you really have to, one of the things I've learned about not just building the business I'm about to talk about in a minute, but building a business in general, is that you have to sit down and define for yourself what it is that you want the business to do for you. Why are you starting the business? Why are you trying to start as a freelance writer? Why are you trying to sell on Amazon? Why are you trying to become an influencer? Why are you trying to do these things, right? And it shouldn't be because of what you heard somebody else say. It should be because you have self-introspected and you have come to the conclusion that this is how I want my life to look like. This is where I'd like to go with this. And so I'm taking this step, I'm taking this decision because this is where I would like to be. And when you do that, listen, you will have a very peaceful time being an entrepreneur. You won't feel pressured. And because you know where you're going, because you know what your goals are, one of the things that ends up happening is that you just focus on those things. You don't get distracted by shiny objects. You don't. So that's one of the biggest things I've learned about business in general. But now let's talk about the business that I really set out to talk about when I first created this video, which is an educational business called the Bold PhD. Now, back in 2020, you know what had happened back then. Yeah, towards the end of 2020, I had made a post on LinkedIn about PhDs and creativity. And that post was my very, very first taste of going viral it was viral to me on LinkedIn, where I had tons of comments, like there were tons of shares and likes. It was crazy. And overnight, I got connected with so many phenomenal PhDs. Well, in that time, when I began to have these conversations, people began to have conversations with me. One of the things I learned was that there were so many people that were burnt out by being in academia. Most people who get PhDs, okay, usually have the intent of staying in a university setting and being a professor, either doing research or teaching, right? But over the years, one of the things that has happened is that, academic jobs have dwindled. And on top of that, being in academia, being a university professor or researcher is not always the very best compensated job. So I saw people saying this to me over and over again. And at that time, I was an adjunct professor and I was also freelance writing. So it's like, maybe this may be a place for me to really talk about exploring careers outside of academia. And as it just so happens, just at the beginning of 2021, I started my role as a medical writer in a marketing agency, and I left academia to do that full time. And so I began to talk about that. And the more I talked about that, the more people came around. So I would like to say I sort of stumbled into the Bold PhD, but I didn't completely stumble into it because I listened. And this is what I want you to take away from this. One of the biggest things I want you to take away from this video, is that when you want to start a business, it's important to listen. It's important to listen to what people want. A lot of the time, people jump into things because other people are doing it. And, maybe that's, I did the same thing in the very beginning. I started blogging because I saw other people blogging. I didn't even really have a goal then. But I find that in order to start a business that can be profitable, a business that is also impactful, okay, not just profit. Profit is good, but I think more than that, I don't know, this is one of my values, more than the money, right? It's the impact. It's the change you can make in other people's lives. It's when people come back to tell you, hey, because I watched your video, because I read your book, or because I bought your course, this thing changed in my life. That for me is the biggest high. The money is nice, but that's the biggest high for me. So I'm really listening to what people were saying. And then when I got into medical writing, people beginning to ask me about how I had gotten into medical writing. Now, of course, I had been writing and I'd been a health writer for about 3 years leading up to that. So I had all of that experience, plus now I was in a full-time role. So I began to share on that as well on the Bold PhD. And it really, really began to pick up. And let me take a sip of my tea. And so the way that I began to create content was on YouTube. I love YouTube. I love video. It's a very expressive way for me to, it's a medium I love. So, I began to create YouTube videos. And as I began to create them and also optimize for search, so that when people were searching for these questions, right? Because if 10 people have asked me the same question, there are hundreds, even thousands out there that are looking for answers to the same question. And so I did my SEO research. I began to create content around the subject of leaving academia, medical writing, thriving, as an academic outside of the academy. And so, like I said, it's important for you to listen. So this second lesson is definitely tied to the first lesson. The first lesson, I was saying listen. The second lesson is to really define the audience you want to serve. So within, this sphere, I could do multiple things, right? But one of the things that I found was most impactful, and which I began to get invited to speak on a lot, was personal branding for PhDs. Okay, personal branding is quite common in the entrepreneur world, but for people who are in the academy or for academics, it was not a completely new concept, but it was something that nobody was really talking about, right? So I was like, okay, I really want to talk to academics about building your personal brand, because I had seen how building my own personal brand had benefited me, not just as an entrepreneur, but also in my career. So I began to talk about that, and then I got invited to speak at schools. That was the part of it that floored me. It was like, wow, people are willing to like invite me and even pay me, give me some money to come and talk to them about building a personal brand as a PhD. So then I began to whittle down what it is exactly my message was and who that audience was for. And I came to the realization, okay, my audience is PhD students and PhDs who want to build personal brands that they can leverage to find careers outside of academia. And once I had that messaging down and I knew the audience I was going after, it just kind of like went that way. It just like shot up, because I had finally defined the audience that I really wanted to serve. Now, there are other people who serve people in this same space. I can think of the Academic Society with Dr. Toyin, and she specifically creates content around productivity for academics and productivity for graduate students. I'm not teaching productivity, right? I'm teaching personal branding. So it's really important for you to define what it is that your messaging is and what it is that the end goal is going to be for somebody that interacts with your content or interacts with your paid products. So once that was defined, that was really helpful as well. Starting the Bold PhD also helped me to really take my speaking career seriously. Speaking is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I remember my first few speaking gigs were back in 2018, and then so one of the things I did was to keep clips. Before that, in 2017, I had gone to a conference and I had met my friend, my internet friend, Felicia Jones, and Felicia would teach people how to speak, you know, how to book speaking gigs. Felicia does hundreds of speaking engagements every single year and has a business that actually helps people find speaking gigs and close those. So one of the things she told me when we first met, and she's such a sweetheart, she was like, she calls me Dr. G. She's like, Dr. G, you need to like get a speaker page, and you need to, you know, take some photos and videos of yourself speaking. Okay, do that. And so I remember when she said that, when I came back home, it was something that I ruminated on. And so in 2018, when I got my first few speaking gigs, I remember I took pictures, I took some videos and kept those. And then I began to put those in a place. I put them on my website. And so if you go to this link right here, you'll be able to see some of that. But I was able to keep those. Like when people tweeted me during the event, I took screenshots of those to use as testimonials. And I built a speaker page and a speaker media kit for speaking gigs. And yeah, believe it or not, people found those and people invited me to speak. How crazy is that? You know, but that's the power of building a personal brand. They first encountered my personal brand, then they went to my website, found I speak, and then they emailed me, and it was helpful. And I remember one person particularly told me, you know, something was really helpful to see that media kit of yours, because once I looked at that, I knew that you would be the right person to show up to speak to our audience. So, you know, speaking has my opportunities to speak have definitely increased by starting the Bold PhD, and it helped that I had that speaker page. It helped that I had that speaker media kit that people could refer to, and it helped that I had some evidence, right? So even though the talks I had done in 2018, those were all unpaid talks, because I was standing in front of an audience, because I was truly speaking to an audience, because it was well received by the audience, I was able to take those bits and pieces and put them together, create something that would be attractive to these organizers at these schools to invite me to speak. And I'm just excited to say that in January, I have a talk. In February, I have a talk, and I have one coming up in the end of March or April. And so it's super exciting for me that I get to speak to audiences on this. And so if you think that speaking is something that you want to do, then I encourage you to do a similar thing where you curate a speaker page, where you create a speaking media kit. And recently I was like listening to some people who talk about influencer marketing, and it's not really an area I myself want to go into, influencer marketing, but I find it very intriguing that people build massive careers out of influencing. So one of the things I've learned from that industry is that media kits are your currency. Okay, and or what's a media kit? A media kit simply is, it's usually a one sheet. It has your name and it has details about your online presence and where you've been featured, okay, or a work that you've done. And so it's sort of like a resume for influencers. And I picked some lessons from there where they show their social media followings. They may showcase campaigns that they've done with brands. And so on my speaker media kit, I showcase the places that I've been interviewed on podcasts and the places that I've spoken, the other schools I've spoken at. And this is what the influencers use to like pitch brands and get brands to pay them 4 figures, 5 figures, sometimes even 6 figures if they're, influencers with a really large following and really large impact. And I think it's great. It's wonderful, and so that's something I borrowed from the influencer industry as well. That was super helpful. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you want to speak or if you want to do anything really, then create a place where there's evidence of you doing that thing. Create a place where people can go to and say, oh, she speaks, or she does this, or she does that. For my writers that are listening to me, like, this is why I talk about having your writer website or your writer page. If somebody is going to pay you to do something for them, they want to see that you've done this before. These things don't happen by accident. And that's another thing. Let me chip in this lesson. Nothing is by accident. Success is not accidental. Yes, there are people that sort of roll into things, people that sort of come into things. But one of the biggest lessons I've learned from the Bold PhD is that my success there and the growing success, I wouldn't even say it's like a huge success, but the growing success I'm beginning to experience definitely has come from being strategic, right? Listening to my audience, defining my audience, listening to the questions that they're asking, making videos that they want me to make, researching online to see what other questions they may be asking, creating content around that, then creating an email freebie that would suit that, and creating products that would suit that. It really is absolutely important for you to realize that none of this happens accidentally. And if you put the right pieces in place, you're going to build an amazing business. I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, let me know in the comments below. Let me know. And let me know if you want me to make more videos like this year where I kind of review business and all of that. There are more videos coming on the channel. So look out for it.